Hello and welcome to Fairy Tale Friday, where I read from Grimm's fairy tales. These are by the brothers Grimm, and this is a book that I've had since childhood. So it's nice to revisit and read the stories that I'd gone through numerous times as a kid. Last week I read One Eye, Two Eyes, and Three Eyes, a story where the one, Two Eyes, who looked like everybody else, was shunned by her family because, well, she looked like everybody else. In this story, we again have, this time, stepsisters, and it does not go well for one of the sisters. And it's a story I'm betting most of you remember or have heard, and that is Cinderella. Once upon a time, classic beginning for a Grimm's fairy tale, the wife of a certain rich man fell very ill, and as she felt her end drawing nigh, she called her only daughter to her bedside and said, "My dear child, be pious and good, and then the good God will always protect you, and I will look down upon you from heaven and think of you." Soon afterwards she closed her eyes and died. Every day the maiden went to her mother's grave and wept over it, and she continued to be good and pious. When winter came, the snow made a white covering over the grave, and in the springtime, when the sun had withdrawn this covering, the father took to himself another wife. This wife brought home with her two daughters, who were beautiful and fair in the face, but treacherous and wicked at heart. Then misfortune began in the poor stepchild's life. "Shall a stupid goose sit in the parlor with us?" said the two daughters. "They who would eat bread must earn it. Out with the kitchen maid." So they took off her fine clothes and put upon her an old grey bedgown and gave her wooden shoes for her feet. "See how the once proud princess is decked out now," said they, and they led her mockingly into the kitchen. All right, I'm just going to say this at the start. Where was the father? Like, seriously, dude. Okay, got that out of my system. Then she was obliged to work hard from morning till night, and to go out early to fetch water, to make fire, and cook, and scour. Besides this, the sisters treated her with every possible insult, derided her, and shook the peas and beans into the ashes so that she had to pick them out again. At night, when she was tired, she had no bed to lie on, but was forced to sit in the ashes on the hearth, and because this made her look dirty, they named her Cinderella. One day it happened that the father was going to the fair, so he asked his two stepdaughters what he should bring them. Some beautiful dresses," said one. "Pearls and precious stones," replied the other. "But you, Cinderella," said he, "what will you have?" Okay, so even he calls her Cinderella? Really? "The first bough, father, that knocks against your hat on your way homewards. Break it off for me," she replied. So he bought the fine dresses and the pearls and precious stones for his two stepdaughters, and on his return, as he rode through a green thicket, a hazel bough brushed against him and knocked off his hat. Then he broke off the branch and took it with him. As soon as he got home, he gave his stepdaughters what they wished for, and to Cinderella he gave the hazel branch. She thanked him very much, and going to her mother's grave, planted the branch, and wept so long that her tears fell and watered it, so that it grew and became a beautiful tree. 3 times a day Cinderella went beneath it to weep and pray, and each time a little white bird flew on the tree, and if she wished aloud, the little bird threw down to her whatever she wished for. After a time it fell out that the king appointed a festival which was to last 3 days, and to which all the beautiful girls in the country were invited, in order that his son might choose a bride. What's that reality show where They all traipse around, bachelor, bachelorette. You know the deal where you don't really know somebody, but then you hang around for a few weeks and decide you're going to get married. When the two stepdaughters heard that they might also appear, they were very glad, and calling Cinderella, they said, "Comb our hair, brush our shoes, and fasten our buckles, for we're going to the festival at the king's palace." Cinderella obeyed, crying because she wished to go with them to the dance, and she begged her stepmother to allow her to do so. "You, Cinderella," said she, "you're covered with dust and dirt. Will you go to the festival? You've no clothes or shoes. How can you go to the dance?" But as she kept asking, her stepmother said at last, "I've now shaken into the ashes a dish of lentils. If you've picked them up again in 2 hours, you shall go." Then Cinderella left the room and went out through the back door into the garden and called out, "You tame pigeons and doves, and all you birds of heaven, come and help me to gather the good into the pot, and the bad you may eat." Presently, in at the kitchen window came 2 white pigeons, after them the doves, and soon all the birds under heaven flew chirping in and down upon the ashes. Then they began, pick, 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 and gathered all the good seeds into the dish. Scarcely an hour had passed when, all completed, the birds flew away. Then the maiden took the dish to her stepmother, rejoicing at the thought that she may now go to the festival. But the stepmother said, "No, Cinderella, you have no clothes and cannot dance. You'll only be laughed at." Then, as Cinderella began to cry, the stepmother said, "If in 1 hour you can pick up quite clean 2 dishes of lentils, which I throw among the ashes, you shall go with us." And she thought to herself, "She will never manage it." I'm thinking Cinderella should have clued in. This ain't happening. As soon as the 2 dishes had been shot into the ashes, Cinderella went out through the back door. "You tame pigeons and doves, all you birds, come and help me gather the good into the pot, and the bad you may eat." Presently, in at the kitchen window came 2 white pigeons. The doves and all the birds under heaven flew chirping in and down upon the ashes, and they began, pick, 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 and gathered all the good seeds into the dishes, and scarcely had half an hour passed before all was picked up, and off they flew. The maiden now took the dishes to her stepmother, rejoicing at the thought she could go to the festival. But the stepmother said, "This does not help you a bit. You cannot go with us. You have no clothes, and cannot dance. We should be ashamed of you." Thereupon she turned her back upon the girl and hastened away with her 2 proud daughters. As there was no one at home, Cinderella went to her mother's grave under the hazel tree and said, "Rustle and shake yourself, dear tree, and silver and gold throw down to me." Then the bird threw down a dress of gold and silver, and slippers ornamented with silk and silver. These Cinderella put on in great haste, and then she went to the ball. Her sisters and stepmother did not know her at all, and took her for some foreign princess. She looked so beautiful in her golden dress. Of Cinderella they thought not, but that she was sitting at home picking the lentils out of the ashes. Soon the prince came to her, and taking her by the hand, led her to dance. He would dance with no one else, and would not even let go her hand. If anyone else asked her to dance, he said, "She is my partner." They danced till evening, when she wished to go home, but the prince said, "I will go with you and see you safe," for he wanted to know to whom the maiden belonged. She flew away from him, however, and sprang into the pigeon house. So the prince waited till Cinderella's father came, whom he told that the strange maiden had run into the pigeon house. Then the old man thought, could it have been Cinderella? They brought an axe and a pickaxe, and the prince could open the door, but no one was found within. When they came into the house, there lay Cinderella in her dirty clothes among the ashes, and an oil lamp was burning on the chimney piece. For she had jumped quickly out from the other side of the pigeon house, and had run to the hazel tree, where she'd taken off her fine clothes and laid them on the grave. The bird had taken them again, and afterwards she had put on her little grey gown and seated herself among the ashes in the kitchen. The next day, when the festival was renewed and her parents and stepsisters had set out again, Cinderella went to the hazel tree and sang as before. Rustle and shake yourself, dear tree, and silver and gold throw down to me. Then the bird threw down a much more splendid dress than on the first day, and when the maiden appeared at the ball, everyone was astonished at her beauty. The prince, who had waited till she came, took her hand and would dance with no one else. If others came, he replied as before, "She is my partner." As soon as evening came, Cinderella wished to leave, and the prince followed her, wishing to see into whose house she went. But she sprang away and ran into the garden behind the palace. There stood a fine large tree on which hung the most beautiful pears, and Cinderella climbed among them so nimbly that the boughs rustled as though a squirrel was among them, but the prince could not see whence the noise proceeded. He waited, however, till Cinderella's father came by and said to him, "The strange maiden has escaped from me, and I think she's climbed up into this tree." The father thought to himself, "Can it be Cinderella?" and had an axe brought and chopped down the tree, but there was no one in it. When they went into the kitchen at home, there lay Cinderella among the ashes as before, for she had sprung down the other side of the tree, again took her beautiful clothes to the bird upon the hazel tree. She had once more put on her grey old gown. The third day, when her parents and stepsisters set out, Cinderella went again to her mother's grave and said, "Rustle and shake yourself, dear tree, and silver and gold throw down to me." Then the bird threw down to her a dress which was more splendid and glittering than she had ever before seen, and the slippers were all golden. When she arrived at the ball, they knew not what to say for wonderment, and the prince danced with her alone as at first, and replied to everyone who had asked, "She is my partner." As soon as evening came, she wished to go. Again the prince followed her, but she ran away so quick he could not overtake her. It's impressive in gold shoes, I'll say that for her. But he contrived a stratagem and spread the whole staircase with pitch. So it happened that as Cinderella ran, her left slipper came off. The prince took it up and saw it was small and graceful and quite golden. The following morning he went with it to Cinderella's father and said, "My bride shall be no other than she whose foot this golden slipper fits." The two sisters were glad of this, for they had beautiful feet, and the elder went with it to her chamber to try it on, while the mother stood by. She could not get her great toe into it, and the shoe was much too small. But the mother, reaching a knife, what's it with these mothers and knives in these stories? "Cut off your toe, for if you're queen, you need no longer go on foot." The girl cut off her toe and squeezed her foot into the shoe, and concealing the pain she felt, went to the prince. Then he placed her as his bride upon his horse and rode off. As they passed by the grave, there sat two little doves upon the hazel tree, singing, backward peep, there's blood upon the shoe. The shoe's too small, and she behind is not the bride for you." Then the prince looked behind and saw the blood flowing, so he turned his horse back, took the false bride home, saying she was not the right one. Then the other sister must needs fit on the shoe, so she went to her chamber and got her toes nicely into the shoe, but the heel was too large. I'm thinking they should have just done this, in front of everybody, but that would obviously change the story. The mother, reaching a knife, as mothers do, cut a piece off your heel, for when you become queen, you no longer need go on foot. So the girl cut a piece off her heel, squeezed her foot into the shoe. Oh, it's just making me cringe, think of it. Concealing the pain she felt, went down to the prince. Then he put her upon his horse as his bride and rode off. And we know what happens at the hazel tree. The two little doves, backward peep, there's blood upon the shoe. The shoe's too small and she behind is not the bride for you. He looked behind, saw the blood trickling from the shoe, and that the stocking was dyed quite red. So as he turned his horse back and took his false bride home again, saying, "Neither is this the right maiden. Have you no other daughter?" "No," replied the father, "except a little Cinderella, daughter of my deceased wife, who cannot possibly be the bride." Okay, this guy is a major jerk. The prince asked that she might be fetched, but the stepmother said, "Oh no, she's much too dirty. I dare not let her be seen." But the prince would have his way, so Cinderella was called, and first washing her hands and face, she went in and curtsied to the prince, who gave her the golden shoe. Cinderella sat down on a stool. Okay, I'm hoping somebody's washed this shoe. And taking off her heavy wooden shoes, put on the slipper, which fitted her to a shade. As she stood up, the prince looked in her face, and recognizing the beautiful maiden with whom he had danced, exclaimed, "This is my rightful bride." I'm thinking that should have been a clue before, let alone the others going to their room to put on the shoe, but you know. The stepmother and the two sisters were amazed and white with rage. But the prince took Cinderella upon his horse and rode away, and as they came upon the hazel tree, the two little doves sang, backward peep, there's no blood on the shoe. It fits so nice, and she behind is the true bride for you." And as they finished, they flew down and lighted upon Cinderella's shoulders, one on the right, one on the left, and there they remained. When the wedding with the king's son was celebrated, the two false sisters came and tried to get into favor with Cinderella and share her good fortune, as conniving biatches do. When the betrothed couple went to church, the elder sister was on the right and the younger on the left, and the pigeons pecked out one eye of each of them. Afterwards, as they came back, the elder was at the left, the younger at the right, and then the pigeons picked out the other eye of each. Thus, for their wickedness and falsehood, they were punished with blindness as long as they lived. Well, there you go. In this story, the lesson is, don't be a douchey dad, don't be a nasty stepmother, and if you're going to treat people nasty, karma is going to get you. Let me know if you remember this version of Cinderella. There have been so many remakes over the years. Next week, I'll be reading Little Red Cap. I'm guessing most of you know the story by another name. Let me know in the comments down below if you know who we're going to be reading about next. Take good care.